Welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you?
Back when COVID was a big deal, everybody got a taste of working from home. Now that everybody's back in our cafe here, they keep asking me if they can work from home again someday. And I just keep telling them, what in the ever-loving heck are you talking about, Dave? You can't make and serve coffee remotely. How would that even work? Yeah, sorry, this was a call-out for Dave the whole time. Not too bright, that one. Anyway, today I've got a load of new, scary stories about people who work from home and experienced something terrifying while home alone. Got a scary work story for me? Send it to me at eeriecast.com/submit. Get my new and beautiful collectible hardcover book coming out July 8th, 2025. Search for Creepy Campfire Stories by Darkness Prevails on Amazon and pre-order today for loads of the perfect, scary, and allegedly true stories to tell around the campfire. And of course, be sure to follow and rate Tales from the Break Room on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to help us grow. Thank you. Now then, these are Tales from the Break Room. When Something Knows Your Pets, from Overlander. This story is something I can't help but think about when I'm home alone at night sometimes. The year was 2002. I had started my junior year at my local university. The housing market was cheap back then, before the 2008 crash and long before the current insanity. And my parents helped me put a down payment on this little 3-bedroom in a new development. I was 20 years old then, had a decent part-time web design gig I could do remotely, and felt like I was really adulting, you know? The neighborhood was still mostly under construction. Of the 12 or so lots on my block, only 2 had finished houses. Mine and old Mr. Carstairs' place at the end of the street. The rest were either empty lots or half-finished frames draped in Tyvek. Construction stalled due to some permit issues with the developer. My little slice of suburban isolation suited me fine. I was never much for parties and preferred my own company. And I had my 2 cats, Olive and Jasper, for companionship. I'd rescued the 2 of them from the same shelter. Jasper was this sleek black cat with these intense green eyes that always made him look like he was plotting something. Olive was a scraggly calico who'd survived a really bad respiratory infection as a kitten. The vet said she was lucky to be alive, but it left her with this distinctive half-wheeze, half-hoarse meow that sounded almost human sometimes. You could pick it out from a mile away. Working from home in 2002 wasn't common like it is now. No Zoom, no Slack. I had a crappy DSL connection and spent most of my days building basic websites for local businesses. The cats would keep me company, usually curled up on either side of my desk chair, as I worked late into the night. I liked the quiet of those unfinished streets. During the day, there would be the occasional construction noise from other parts of the development, but at night, it was just me and the cats, and the wind rustling through the empty lots. The first time it happened was in October. I remember because I'd been working on a Halloween-themed site for a local haunted house attraction. Lots of cheesy gifs of dancing skeletons and blinking pumpkins. Real cutting-edge stuff for the time. I'd been at it for hours, and it was somewhere around 2 a.m. when I first heard the rustling outside. At first, I thought it was the wind. October in Oklahoma can be pretty blustery. But there was something about it, like something was moving around out there, circling the house and not just random bursts of wind. I remember looking over at Jasper, who was sitting upright on my desk, ears perked up and eyes fixed on my bedroom window. Cats always know, am I right? I turned my music down and listened. The sound seemed to move from the side of the house to the front, like something was dragging itself along the exterior walls. I told myself it was probably a raccoon, maybe even one of the neighborhood strays. The development backed up to some woodland, and we'd get all kinds of wildlife passing through from time to time. After a few minutes, the sound stopped, and I went back to work. Around 3 a.m., I decided I needed coffee. If I was going to finish this project by morning, I needed something to keep me up. Both cats followed me to the kitchen, as they always did, probably hoping for a midnight snack. I had just started the coffee maker when I heard something. A meow from just outside the front door. But it wasn't just any meow. It was that distinctive half-wheeze, half-hoarse cry that belonged to Olive. But Olive was right there at my feet, looking up at me expectantly, waiting for a treat. My blood went cold. I looked down at her, then back toward the front door. The sound came again. The same hoarse cry. And this time Olive's head snapped toward the door too, her pupils dilating into perfect black circles. I was frozen there in my own kitchen, coffee now forgotten, as both cats stared at the front door. When the meowing stopped, it was replaced by what I can only describe as a soft scratching at the door. And then silence. For that second, I thought it was over. I was just about to convince myself that it was another cat, and maybe those respiratory infections in cats were more common than I thought, when there was a violent scraping sound from above. Sounded like something with big claws scrambling across my roof. It moved unnaturally fast, from one end to the other, culminating in a high-pitched screech that didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard of. And then there was silence again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, cats huddled close to me on the couch, until the sun came up. In the light of day, I checked the roof and the front door, but nothing. I didn't find any scratches or evidence that something had been out there. Life went on. I convinced myself it was some weird wildlife encounter. Could have been an injured animal that moved on, possibly a rare bird that was traveling through. For the next couple of weeks, everything was normal. The weather turned cold and construction in the neighborhood remained stalled, and I fell back into my routine. My mom's birthday was coming up in early November, and I was out in the backyard vaping one evening while on the phone with my dad, discussing what we should get her. I had a habit of pacing around when I talked on the phone, and my backyard had a privacy fence that ran around the perimeter. 6 feet high, solid wood. I was walking the edge of it, listening to my dad talking about maybe getting Mom a new sewing machine, when I heard it again. That half-wheeze, half-hoarse meow, coming from just on the other side of the fence, right next to me. Mid-sentence, I stopped dead in my tracks. "Dad," I whispered. "I'll call you back." "What? We need to decide on..." "I'll call you back," I said again, and hung up. The meowing came again, and with it, there was a soft scratching at the wood, like something was dragging nails down the fence right where I was standing. I could see my sliding glass door about 20 feet away, both cats clearly visible through it, sitting on the living room couch. So whatever was making that sound wasn't Olive. I started to back away slowly, eyes fixed on the fence. The scratching seemed to follow me, moving along the other side of the fence at exactly the same pace. I quickened my steps and so did the scratching. That's when the fear really hit me. This thing was tracking me, matching me movement for movement. I was about halfway to the house when I heard a heavy thud behind me, the unmistakable sound of something landing on my side of the fence. Something heavy. I ran then, like heck. I could feel my eyes watering and tears streaming down my face. I was so panicked I could barely get the door handle to function. I kept thinking I'd feel claws or teeth on my back at any moment. But I got it, and I crashed into my living room, slamming the door shut and locking it. I collapsed on the floor, breathing hard and shaking uncontrollably. Both cats were staring past me, out into the darkened yard, backs arched and tails puffed up. But from what I could see, there was nothing there. Or at least, nothing I could see. I never did see what it was. Not that night, and not ever. But for the 3 weeks after that, I would hear that same hoarse meowing outside my windows some nights. Often it would be at the front door, other times the back. The cats would go crazy every time, racing around the house, hissing at the walls. One night I heard something heavy land on the roof directly above my bedroom. It paced back and forth all night long, that scraping sound moving from one end of the house to the other. I lay in bed, frozen and terrified, as it seemed to be trying different spots, like it was trying to find a way in. I stayed with my parents for a couple weeks after that, and when I came back, I never heard my guest ever again. I sometimes wonder what it was and where it went, and I do wonder if my pet was the only one it learned to mimic. Why would it do something like that? Over the years, I've owned several more cats since then, but none of them have ever sounded quite like Olive, and for that, I'm grateful. The Invisible Roommate, from Meridith R. I've been writing fiction for decades, but what happened in my apartment in late 2018 is far stranger than anything I've ever put on paper, and I guess what makes it worse is that it was real. I'm hesitant to even call it a ghost story because I don't even know what it was. I just know it was there, and it wanted my attention. At 46 years old, I thought I was past the point of roommates and shared living spaces. My novel series had done well enough that I could afford a modest one-bedroom apartment in the quiet parts of Chicago, where I could work in peace. The place was small, but it had character. Exposed brick in the living room and hardwood floors with just the right amount of creak. The bedroom was small but cozy, dominated by a queen-sized bed and my prized possession, a vintage leather armchair I'd found at an estate sale years earlier. The chair was worn in all the right places, molded to the human form after decades of use. Perfect for curling up with a good book. Let's start with the first incident. It happened on a Tuesday night. I remember because I'd spent the day responding to my editor's notes on my latest manuscript and was mentally exhausted. Chicago was already deep into its pre-winter gloom at the time, where everything seems darker and colder, but not quite as dark and cold as it's gonna get. I was drinking tea when someone knocked at the door. 3 sharp raps. I wasn't expecting any guests, but sometimes neighbors do show up to borrow something. So I set down my mug and went to the door. There wasn't a peephole, one of the apartment's few flaws, so I called out first. "Who is it?" Silence. I opened the door, thinking perhaps they hadn't heard me. But the hallway outside was empty. Not just empty of people, but empty of sound or movement. Nothing to suggest that there was anyone here only seconds ago. In my building, you could always hear footsteps on the stairs or the elevator dinging, but there was nothing. "Weird," I muttered. I closed and locked the door. I just settled back in the kitchen when it came again. 3 knocks, same rhythm, same intensity. This time I moved in a hurry, and I yanked the door open within seconds. But no, just an empty hallway. I stepped out and looked both ways to be sure, but there was nothing. The building wasn't that old, built in the 70s, I think, and had never struck me as particularly creepy before. But standing there in the empty hallway, I felt a chill run through me. Back inside, I tried to shake it off. Some kids were playing pranks on me, I thought, though I'd never seen many kids in this building. It happened about 5 more times that night. Each time I checked, I found nothing. By 10:30 p.m., I stopped answering, and by 11, the knocking finally stopped. Eventually, I fell asleep on the couch, awaiting more knocking, though none came. The next day passed by normally, thankfully. I was wondering if I'd been working too hard or staying up too late. Maybe the knocking was some strange quirk of the building's pipes or structure that I hadn't noticed until now. I finished my work early and treated myself to a hot bath and a glass of wine. Around 11 p.m., I was ready for bed. I changed into my pajamas, went through my nighttime routine, and walked into my bedroom to grab the book I was reading. And then I saw it. My leather armchair sat in the corner as it always did, but the cushion was deeply indented. It looked like someone was sitting there, like an invisible weight was pressing into the leather. The indentation was unmistakably the shape of a human bottom and thighs. The leather creased just as it would be if I had been sitting there myself. My heart lurched. I stood paralyzed in the doorway, clutching my book like it could be used as a shield. The room even felt different, and though I couldn't see anybody, I felt watched. I'm a writer. I pride myself on being observant, and in that moment, I made a decision that probably sounds ridiculous. I pretended I hadn't noticed. I forced myself to walk normally to my nightstand, set down my book, and I turned on the lamp, all the while keeping the chair in my peripheral vision. I busied myself straightening things that didn't need straightening, tidying items on my dresser, feeling the weight of unseen eyes on me. For about an hour, I moved around my room, finding tasks to do while discreetly watching the chair. The indentation remained unchanged, as deep and defined as when I'd first seen it. Then, just as I was considering fleeing the apartment entirely, the leather cushion suddenly sprang back to its normal shape, like whatever had been sitting there had gotten up. I froze again, staring openly now at the chair. Seconds later, there were 3 sharp knocks at my front door. That night, I dragged the chair into the living room, pushing it against the wall far from my bedroom, and I barely slept. The following week was quiet. No knocking, no indentations, nothing out of place. I started to relax, to convince myself it had been some bizarre stress-induced hallucination. I even moved the chair back into my bedroom, though I positioned it facing away from my bed. Then came the night of the shower. I was washing my hair, eyes closed against the shampoo, when the bathroom plunged into darkness. I yelped in surprise, immediately assuming that the power had gone out. I wiped the soap from my eyes and I noticed a sliver of light coming from under the bathroom door. The rest of the apartment still had power. Hello? I called out, even though I lived alone and had locked the door. No reply. My heart was racing. I quickly rinsed my hair and reached for the towel hanging just outside the shower curtain. I wrapped it around myself. Then I stepped out onto the bath mat and fumbled for the light switch. The lights came back on immediately, which meant they'd been turned off and had not failed. As I stood there dripping, I saw movement from the corner of my eye. I was startled, jumping and looking. The shower curtain was slowly sliding closed, drawn by an invisible hand if I had to guess. I ran then, half wrapped in my towel, soaking wet, bolting from the bathroom into the living room and grabbing my phone. My hands were shaking as I called my friend, Diane, who lived 10 minutes away from me. "Can you come over?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Like, right now?"
Meredith? What's wrong with you?
"I think someone is in my apartment." I told her, but it wasn't quite right. But how do you tell someone there's something in your apartment that you can't see?
Well, don't call me, call the police,
she said. No, I didn't want the police. What would I tell them? but my lights turned themselves off and my shower curtain moved. "Please, Diane, just come over. Use your key. I'll explain when you get here." To her credit, Diane didn't argue further.
Okay. I'm on my way. Stay on the phone with me if you can.
For the next 10 minutes, I sat huddled on my couch, clutching my towel and my phone, staring at the still open bathroom door. I'd left the shower running, and I could not bring myself to go back in there to turn it off. When Diane arrived, I was still in my towel. "Jesus, Mare, what happened?" She looked around the apartment, clearly expecting to find some signs of an intruder. "Check the bathroom first," I said. "The shower's still on." Diane gave me a confused and concerned look, then went to the bathroom. I heard her shut the water off, and she emerged, looking even more confused. "There's no one here, Mare. What happened?" I told her everything. The knocking, the chair, and now the bathroom. As I spoke, I changed into dry clothes, aware of how crazy all of it sounded. When I was done, Diane was quiet for a while. We had been close friends since college, and she knew I wasn't prone to hysterics or flights of fancy. "You can stay with me tonight," she finally said. "We'll figure this out tomorrow." "Do you believe me?" I asked, surprised and relieved. She shrugged. "I believe you experienced something. Whether it's what you think it is, I don't know, but you're scared, and that's enough for me." We gathered some of my things, and I spent the night on Diane's couch. Neither of us slept much. We stayed up late watching mindless TV, both reluctant to address the elephant in the room, that I might be losing my mind, or my apartment is haunted. Morning eventually came. Diane appeared from her bedroom looking haggard with dark circles under her eyes. "Coffee?" I offered, already moving toward her kitchen. "Yes, please." She sat heavily at her small dining table. "Mare, I need to tell you something." I paused with the coffee pot in hand. "What is it?" Something weird happened last night." She ran a hand through her tangled hair. "I was trying to sleep, and I kept feeling like someone was pulling my hair. Just little tugs at first, but then harder. I turned on the lights and checked the bed, even looked under it, like a little kid. There was nothing there." My blood went cold. "You think it followed me here?" "I don't know what to think," she admitted. "But I didn't sleep a wink last night, and I'm really freaked out." I set the coffee pot down. "Diane, I'm so sorry. I never would have come if I thought—" "Stop," she held up a hand. "You're my friend. I'm glad you came over." She took a deep breath. "But maybe we should talk to someone else about this. Someone who knows about these kinds of things." I ended up staying with Diane for the next 2 days. Nothing else unusual happened, and we both managed to get some sleep. By the 3rd day, I'd convinced myself I could handle the return to my apartment. I had deadlines to meet, after all, and I couldn't impose on Diane forever. "Call me the second anything happens," she insisted as I was leaving. "I mean it, Meridith. Anything at all." "I will," I promised. My apartment felt normal when I got back. Just a space, not some threatening environment it had become in my mind. I opened up all the curtains to let in the sunlight, turned on every light, and put on some music to fill the silence. For about an hour, everything was fine. I settled at my desk, opened my laptop, and tried to focus on my work. And then I heard soft and rhythmic breathing coming from somewhere behind me. In an instant, I spun around, and of course there was nothing there. Just an empty living room. And yet the breathing continued, moving slowly around the perimeter of the room, like someone was there, pacing. I left everything. My laptop, my phone, even my coat. I ran down 4 flights of stairs rather than wait for the elevator, and didn't stop until I reached Diane's apartment again. "It's breathing," was all I could say when she opened up the door. I moved out the following week. Diane let me stay until I found a new place, and I hired movers to pack up my things because I couldn't bear to go back for more than the time it took to sign the paperwork, terminating my lease. The property manager was surprisingly understanding. "The woman before you only lasted 6 months, too," she mentioned casually as I handed in my keys. "Kept saying she heard things." I stared at her. "And you didn't think to mention this when I moved in?" "People say all kinds of things to get out of leases. Besides, the rent is below market." I left my leather chair behind. The movers did ask about it, but I told them to leave it. Whatever had been sitting in it, well, it could keep it. I've been in my new place for over 6 years now. No knocking, no breathing, no invisible indentations. But sometimes late at night when I'm trying to sleep, I find myself listening out for 3 sharp knocks on my door, wondering what would have happened if I had ever acknowledged the presence directly, if I had ever spoken to the empty chair and asked it, "Who are you, and what do you want from me?" Night Shift in the Garage, from JustSomeSchmo. I've always been a night owl. The best hours for me are after midnight. It just so happens I do my best furniture restoration work in that time, out in my detached garage, which is about 30 yards from my house. This was something that I did as a hobby and turned into a decent side business, and now it's how I make my living. My ex-wife used to hate my hours. Probably one of the many reasons she's my ex. The house sits on 5 acres backed up against state forest in western Pennsylvania. Closest neighbor is about a quarter mile down the road. It's private, it's quiet, and perfect for me. I've been here over 8 years and never had any issues. Until now. I got this habit of keeping the big garage door open when I work, even after dark. I love the sounds of crickets in the summer and the wind in the trees during the fall. That sense of connection to the outside world while I'm sanding or staining or whatever. I had installed some motion-detecting floodlights on the driveway a few years back, after someone broke into the Peterson place down the road. Not that I have much of worth stealing out there, just tools and half-finished projects, but better safe than sorry. One night I was working. Well, technically it was around morning. It was 1:30 a.m. Up until 1 a.m. I'd been listening to some late-night talk radio show. I was working on this antique maple dining table that a client from Pittsburgh had brought in. Beautiful piece from the 1880s that someone had absolutely butchered with a thick coat of black paint. Criminal what people do to good furniture. I was in the zone, focusing on my work. That state a person gets in where your hands get busy and your mind wanders. And it was then that the floodlights suddenly kicked in. They're sensitive enough to pick up a freaking rabbit sometimes, so I didn't think much of it at first. But then I started to feel something, a prickly feeling on the back of my neck. I looked up and through the open garage door and saw something. At the very edge of my driveway, right where the circle of light from the floods meets the darkness, stood some sort of animal. A bear? I thought. We get them around here occasionally, though they usually avoid human dwellings. It only took a moment for me to realize it wasn't a bear. It was standing on 2 legs for one, and it was shaped too wrong to be a bear. This figure was about 7 feet tall, covered in dark, matted fur. The build was wrong for any animal I'd ever seen. Too thin for a bear, too big for a wolf or coyote, but definitely canine in its appearance. Its shoulders were hunched forward slightly. Arms, not front legs, but arms, hanging down longer than they should be. and it was just watching me, not moving, not making any noises. It stood there at the edge of the light, observing me. I'd like to say I did something brave or smart, but the truth is, I just stood there too, petrified. My sanding block was still in my hand as I stared back at the thing. I sat there like that for the longest seconds, and when I finally moved, it was with glacial slowness, sidling toward the door control button mounted on the wall. As I moved, I saw the creature's head tilt slightly, sort of like how a dog does when it's confused or curious. That small, almost human gesture was somehow worse than if it had growled or charged. I hit the button for the garage door then, and as it started to lower, the thing took a single step forward. And by then the door had closed, and I was alone in my garage with my heart trying to escape my body. I packed up my tools quickly, turned off everything, and ran full speed back to the house. Inside my house, I locked the doors and windows, and I stayed up a little later. I kept thinking I heard scratching sounds outside, though it probably wasn't anything. The next day, my brother Joe came by to borrow my pressure washer. While he was there, I told him about what I'd seen. Of course, his first thought was, probably a bear, in that dismissive older brother way that made me feel 8 years old again. They can stand on their hind legs too, you know. Can look pretty human sometimes. It wasn't a bear, I insisted. I know what bears look like, and this was something else. Joe shrugged. Well, Bobby over in Westmoreland County swears he saw Bigfoot in his cornfield last summer, and that turned out to be his neighbor's Great Dane that got loose. Eyes play tricks on you in the dark. I dropped it then. No point arguing. I knew what I saw, and it wasn't a dog, and it wasn't a bear, and it was no guy in a costume. For the next few weeks, I kept the garage door closed when I worked at night. But as time passed and nothing else happened, I gradually slipped back into my old habits. The garage gets stuffy with the door down, especially if I'm using varnish or stain. By early November, I was back to leaving it open once again on nice nights. The second time I saw it was on a Thursday evening, not quite dark yet, just a blue twilight, that time before the night fully sets in. I was working on a rocking chair, touching up the spindles with some cherry stain, when I heard an odd sound, sort of like a huffing sound, like someone trying to catch their breath after running. I looked up, and there it was again. This time, it was closer, standing right at the entrance to my garage, maybe 15 feet away from me. In the dim light, I could see it more clearly. It was definitely shaped like a wolf, but massively oversized and standing upright. The fur was dark brown or black, difficult to tell in the shadows. Its face was elongated into a muzzle. Not quite a snout, but not human either. We stared at each other, and I couldn't move, and it didn't move. The only sound was my own pulse in my ears and that strange rhythmic huffing from the creature. My phone rang suddenly, the default ringtone blaring loudly in the silent garage. I instinctively glanced down at my pocket. It couldn't have been more than a second, but when I looked back up, the thing was gone. No sound of it running away. No disturbed gravel on the driveway. Just gone like that. The call was from a potential client. I don't even remember what I said to them. But I must have sounded rattled because they asked if I was okay. And I mumbled something in reply about a bad connection and promised to call them back later. I closed up the garage door immediately, sitting in my truck for a while, deciding to drive instead of walk the short distance over to my house. I talked to Joe a little while later. "You still seeing monsters in your garage, dude?" He joked. "Well, it did come back," I said to him. This time the humor drained from his voice. "Dude, are you serious? What was it?" "I don't know, but it was the same thing, standing right at the edge of my garage this time." Did it do anything? No, just watched me. Then it disappeared when I looked away for a second. There was a long pause. I can go get my shotgun and come back. I declined his offer. I didn't think a shotgun would help, though I couldn't have explained why. As the days wore on, I started to feel increasingly uneasy working in the garage, especially after dark. I'd catch myself constantly glancing at the open door, expecting to see that shape standing there. I never did, but the feeling of being watched never went away. My nearest neighbor mentioned losing 3 chickens over 2 nights, though. Thought it was coyotes at first, he told me when I ran into him at Walmart one day. But whatever it was tore right through the wire on the coop. Never seen a coyote do that before. My dog, a lab shepherd mix named Buddy, who's never been afraid of anything in his 10 years of life, started to refuse to go outside after sunset. He'd stand at the back door, tail between his legs, whining pitifully when I tried to coax him out for the evening bathroom break. Eventually, I started to take him out on a leash in the early afternoon, then just kept him in for the night. The next time it happened, it had snowed that day. Just a dusting that had mostly melted by then, but the air still had that clean and crisp quality to it. There was a storm front moving in from the west. I could see lightning in the distance over the ridge, still miles away, but definitely heading our way. I was in my garage, working on a delicate inlay repair on an antique desk, totally absorbed in my work. It was around midnight. The garage door was open as usual because the varnish fumes were giving me a headache, cold or not. And I had that feeling again. But I had been getting it off and on for weeks, so I tried to ignore it. Figured it was some lingering creeps, you know. But something made me look up. Don't remember what. And I saw it. It was inside my garage this time, standing in the far corner near my lumber rack, standing there and watching me do my work. It had to have been there for a while, silent and motionless. In the full light of my garage, I could see it so clearly. It was exactly what I thought it was. A wolf, but walking around like a man, standing there on 2 legs, easily 7 or 8 feet tall even. Its body was covered in dark fur, and its proportions were just so bizarre, with lanky limbs and broad shoulders. For some reason, I wasn't as terrified as I should have been. Maybe it was shock, or maybe it was something else. The thing was examining my tools hanging on the pegboard, head tilted in that curious dog-like way again. Its back was partly to me now, and it seemed more interested in my workshop than in me at the moment. I shifted in my seat, and my elbow knocked a small container of wood plugs onto the floor. The plastic container hit the concrete with a loud clatter, and the creature's head snapped around to look at me. This is it, I thought. This thing's gonna kill me. But it didn't attack. Instead, it did something so bizarre that I still have trouble believing it happened. It reached one long clawed hand, or maybe a paw, toward my workbench, picked up a chisel I'd left there, and set it back in the rack on the wall where it belonged. Then it looked at me for a long moment, then finally turned and loped off out of the garage into the night, moving with an odd but fluid grace, despite its awkward-looking proportions. I sat there. I didn't want to move. I was trying to understand exactly what I'd just seen. Not just the creature itself, but the way it moved, the way it interacted with things, the way it didn't freaking kill me. The next day, I started to move my essential equipment into the spare bedroom of the house. By the end of the week, I'd converted it into a makeshift workshop. I still use the garage for storage and the initial rough work that makes too much dust for inside, but I don't work out there after dark anymore. Unless I absolutely have to, then I don't go alone. I haven't seen the creature again. Not clearly, anyway. Sometimes when I'm taking the trash out after dark or letting Buddy out for a quick bathroom break, I think I catch glimpses of movement at the tree line. On occasion, I feel like I've been watched from the shadows. And I swear a few times I've found tools in my garage, just slightly rearranged from how I left them when I leave the garage door open. Nothing major, maybe a saw moved from one side of the bench to the other, clamps neatly organized by size when I know I left them in a jumble. Could be I'm doing it myself absent-mindedly and not remembering it. That's what Joe said it was, anyway. Not sure what it was that visited my garage those nights, and I'm not entirely sure if it's still out there. But something impossible walked into my life, stood in my garage, and put away my chisel. Old Cooper and the Basement Mystery. From TJ. I never thought dog sitting would turn into the most unsettling 2 weeks of my life. But that's exactly what happened last summer, when my great aunt and uncle asked me to look after their place while they went to tour Italy. I was home from college for the summer anyway, and their house was just down the hill from my parents' place, barely a 2-minute walk through the woods that separated the properties. It seemed easy. I would be feeding and walking Cooper, their 12-year-old golden retriever, water the plants, bring in the mail. They'd be gone for just 2 weeks and I'd get some extra cash, plus a quiet place to study for my summer courses. A win-win. The first few days were fine. I headed down to their place around 8 a.m., let Cooper out, fed him breakfast, then I took him out for a walk around the property. I would return in the evening to feed him some dinner, play with him a bit, then take him for another shorter walk before heading back up to my parents' house for the night. Cooper was a sweet old dog, a bit stiff in the joints, but still full of that golden retriever friendliness. It was on the 4th day when things got a bit off. I arrived in the evening to find Cooper standing at the top of the basement stairs. He was whining. He didn't come running to greet me like he usually did. When I came over to him, he looked at me, then back down to the stairs. Looked like he wanted me to follow him. "What's up, buddy? You drop your toy down there?" I followed him down into the basement. It's your typical old house basement. Concrete floors and exposed beams, walls lined with shelves of preserves and storage boxes. Cooper went straight to the far corner and sat down, staring intently at a stack of cardboard boxes. I checked behind them, thinking maybe a mouse or something had caught his attention, but I didn't find anything. "There's nothing there, Cooper. Come on, let's go back upstairs." But he wouldn't budge. I had to tempt him with treats to get him to come back upstairs with me for some dinner. I thought it was just a dog getting on up there in years. Sometimes they get fixated on things we can't perceive, and maybe the poor guy was starting to lose it a little bit. The next day, the same thing happened, except this time Cooper seemed more agitated. He kept going between me and the basement, clearly wanting me to come with him. When we got to the same corner, he started to paw at the boxes and whine. I moved them aside, revealing nothing but some old photo albums and a section of wall that looked slightly different than the rest. The concrete was newer, patched. Cooper sniffed along the edge of the patch intensely. Alright, kinda weird, I thought. I opened up one of the old photo albums. It was full of family pictures from the 80s and 90s. I recognized the younger versions of my aunt and uncle, and there were several photos of a little girl. I didn't recognize her. She looked about 5 or 6 in most of the photos, with the same auburn hair as my aunt. I took the album upstairs where the light was better. As I flipped through it, I realized this must be their daughter, which was crazy, because as far as I knew, they never had kids. No one in the family ever mentioned them having kids. When I got back to my parents' house that night, I casually brought it up with my mom while she cooked dinner. Hey, did Aunt and Uncle such and such ever have a daughter? I found these old photos at their place. My mom paused for a moment, then continued to chop vegetables. Where'd you find those? She asked. In the basement. Cooper kept leading me to this corner with boxes of old albums. She went quiet. Yes, actually, they had a daughter named Emily. She disappeared when she was 6. Was about 30 years ago now. Disappeared? What happened? Mom sighed and put the knife down. It was a terrible time. There was a massive search, but they never found her. The police eventually closed the case. Aunt such and such was, well, she wasn't well for a long time afterward. That's terrible. No one ever mentioned any of this to me. It's not something the family talks about, especially your uncle. She gave me a look. It changed him. He wasn't the same after. What's that mean? It means just be careful around their place, Todd, and maybe don't mention the photos of them when they get back. You get me? She wouldn't say anything more about it, but her reaction left me feeling weird. The next few days, Cooper's behavior grew stranger. He started to sleep positioned between me and the basement door whenever I was in the house. He'd growl at nothing, eyes tracking movement that I couldn't see. At first, I thought he might be going senile. Like I said, he's getting older. But it felt different than that. Sort of like he was being protective. About a week into my stay, I arrived to find the basement door, which I always kept closed, standing wide open. Cooper was at the top of the stairs, barking down into the dark. I turned the lights on and went down with him. This time he was practically frantic, pawing at the wall in the corner where the concrete patch was. I examined it more closely and realized it might be covering up what was once a small doorway or access panel. I'm not sure what possessed me to do it, but I went to Uncle Paul's workbench and grabbed a hammer and chisel. Cooper watched as I began to chip away at the edge of the patched section. The concrete was thin there, and it didn't take much effort before I broke through. Beyond, there was a small wooden door, maybe 2 feet square. The door was locked when I tried it, but the wood around the lock was old and soft. A few good hits with the hammer and it splintered enough for me to pull it open. Behind that, there was a small space, almost like a storage cubby built into the foundation. Inside were several notebooks and a metal box. I pulled them out, and boy, I tell you, this growing sense of dread and absolute terror began to fill me, like I should not be doing this and that I shouldn't be here. But I kept going. Judging by Cooper's whimpers, I think he agreed. The notebooks were journals, written by my aunt. I opened a random page. I don't have the exact text in my head, obviously, but I can summarize what it said. It explained how my uncle needs to let things go, that the police had done all they could to find Emily. But my aunt believed that Emily was still in the house. She wrote that sometimes at night she could hear her moving around upstairs, but my uncle would tell her it was just her imagination, that she needed to take more of her medication. There was a part I remember saying that Cooper sees her too, said his eyes followed something that wasn't there. She wrote that my uncle would get angry when my aunt talked about it, and that's as much as I remember. When I opened up the metal box, my hands were already shaking. Inside were newspaper clippings about Emily's disappearance and a small evidence bag containing a child's bracelet with tiny seashells. The last item in the box was a folded-up piece of paper. I opened it, finding a child's drawing of a house. This house, with 4 figures. A woman, a man, a dog, and a little girl. The girl was drawn inside what looked like the basement, while the man stood nearby with angry red crayon scribbles all around him. I felt even more sick. What was I looking at? Did my aunt believe my uncle had something to do with Emily's disappearance? I did not like the implications I was getting. I put everything back quickly, except for one of the journals, which I took upstairs to read more carefully. As I climbed up the basement steps, the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Cooper, who had been right beside me, suddenly stopped and growled at something behind us. When I turned to look, there was nothing there, but I could have sworn I heard the faint sound of footsteps retreating back into the corner. That night, I didn't feel like I should leave Cooper alone at the house. I called my parents and let them know I was going to sleep at my aunt and uncle's house. They didn't question it, though in hindsight, Mom did sound a little concerned. I took Cooper upstairs to the guest bedroom with me. Reading more of my aunt's journal was disturbing. The entries became increasingly paranoid over time, with her convinced, truly, that Emily was still in the house, and that my uncle was somehow keeping her from talking about it. Eventually, the entries stopped, abruptly, followed by a gap of several months. When they eventually resumed, the handwriting had changed. It was steadier but somehow lifeless. These entries were mundane, talking about gardening and church activities, with no mention of Emily. I think I finally fell asleep sometime around the early morning. Cooper was curled up beside the bed. I woke up sometime later to the sound of him growling. It was low but threatening. In the very little light filtering through the curtains, I could see him standing rigidly at the bedroom door. I held my breath and listened. There was a soft shuffling sound in the hallway, like small feet moving across the hardwood floor. Cooper's growl deepened, but he didn't bark or lunge at anything. It was like he was issuing a warning instead. "Hello?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly shaky. The shuffling stopped. Then slowly, the bedroom door, which had been half closed, began to open. Cooper backed up, still growling. He put himself between me and the opening door. There was no one there, though. As the door swung fully open, I could see what had Cooper so alarmed. On the wooden floor of the hallway, I could see small, wet footprints, the size a child would make. They led from the direction of the basement stairs to my bedroom door. As I watched, another footprint appeared, as if pressed into the wood by an invisible foot. I yelled then, scrambling out of the bed and grabbing my phone and Cooper's collar. I backed up against the far wall with them. The footprint stopped just inside the bedroom doorway. For a second, nothing happened. And then the bedroom suddenly went ice cold. And God, I felt something brush past me. Not quite touching me, but displacing the air near my arm. Cooper was whining now, and his eyes were staring into something that I could not see. Something that was apparently circling the room. I saw the items nearby on the dresser begin to rattle a bit. "Emily?" I whispered. Everything went still then. Then, the lamp on the nightstand clicked on by itself. I looked around. There was no one in the room but me and Cooper, who was now staring at a spot near the dresser. His growl was gone, replaced by that same whimpering I'd heard in the basement. I spent the rest of the night with every light in the house turned on, and Cooper glued to my side. I didn't see any more footprints or moving objects, but the feeling of being watched never went away. The next morning, I went to town for a while, and when I came back, Cooper was waiting at the door, appearing agitated. As soon as I let myself in, he led me straight to the basement again. This time, the hidden cubby I'd broken into was wide open, and my aunt's journals were spread out on the floor, open to various pages, but I know I'd put them back and closed that door up. Over the next few days, these strange occurrences increased. I found doors open that I'd closed before, items moved around, and one time I found photos of Emily that hadn't been there, lying on the dining room table. Cooper alternated between protective growling and whimpering, and when I saw him watching something I couldn't see, I would get chills down my spine. Eventually, my aunt and uncle came back. I was finishing up cleaning the place, trying to act normal. Tried to make that hidden door in the basement look untouched. Cooper, who had been so animated and protective for 2 weeks, seemed to deflate as soon as they walked in. He slunk away to his bed in the corner of the living room, watching my uncle. "How was everything? Any problems?" my uncle asked. "All good," I lied. "Cooper and I got along great." My aunt smiled. "He's such a good dog. He's old now. Uncle such and such thinks we should put him down soon, don't you, dear? He's been so anxious lately." That made me shiver. Cooper wasn't old enough yet to warrant being put down, and despite his strange behavior lately, he seemed so healthy. "He seemed fine to me," I said. "Really protective, actually. He's a great guard dog." My uncle looked over. "Protective? Did someone come around here?" No, just, he's attentive, always aware of his surroundings." My uncle nodded slowly, agreeing with me. "Well, thanks for taking care of the place. Let me get your payment." As he left the room, my aunt touched my arm. "Did Cooper spend a lot of time in the basement?" she asked, quietly. "Some," I was hesitant to say. He seemed interested in some old photo albums. Something flickered in her eyes, just for a moment. Then they went back to normal. "Those old things. Uncle such and such keeps saying we should throw them out." When I left, I saw Cooper watching me from the window. I felt so guilty, like I was abandoning him when he needed me. The day after that, I drove back down to their house. I had to at least try to convince them to let me take Cooper. As I pulled up, I saw my uncle loading something into the back of the SUV. Cooper, and he looked sedated, barely able to stand. "What's going on?" I asked. "Taking him to the vet. He bit your aunt this morning. Drew blood." That didn't sound right. Sounded like a lie to me. My aunt was standing on the porch. I saw both her arms, no bandages, no injuries. "I came to ask if I could have him," I said. "If you don't want him anymore, I'll take him." "No need to trouble yourself. The appointment's already made." "Just let Todd take him," my aunt suddenly spoke up. We were both surprised. "Cooper likes him." My uncle's jaw clenched up. He looked either mad or irritated at first, but then loosened up. "Fine. Take the darn dog." I helped Cooper into my car. He was groggy, but otherwise fine. He was looking back at the house as we drove away. So that's how Cooper came to live with me now. He stays with me at my apartment near campus these days. He's back to being a normal, friendly golden retriever. No more growling at unseen presences, and no more leading me to hidden secrets. I know a lot of people reading this story will think that I didn't do enough to help Emily. But the thing is, I don't want to risk family drama over something that's even less than hearsay. I don't know what happened back then, but I do hope her soul rests in peace. Well, there you have it. If you're at home trying to type up a new blog post to make some ad revenue, and your dog starts to have full-on conversations with the thing in the corner you can't see, maybe go out for some Wendy's for a few days, if you catch my drift. Thanks for listening to another episode of Tales from the Break Room. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails, and you can find me on Twitter at DarkPrevails. And you can send me your scary work stories at eeriecast.com/submit. Help us grow and reach more people who love scary stories by following and rating Tales from the Break Room on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also, don't forget to check out my new upcoming book, Creepy Campfire Stories, with a link in the description, or searching for Creepy Campfire Stories on Amazon. I'm trying to reach 2,500 pre-orders, and the first 100 pre-orders to verify via the link in the description will get an exclusive Darkness Prevails plushie. Until next time, everyone, I've got to clock out, because I have to sleep sometimes too, you know. A man my age has to get his 14 hours a night. Anyway, I'll be back again real soon. Stay creepy, y'all.